Hello, everyone. Selena Baca here with the Yarn Live Show. I've got a guest, Katelyn Moll, joining me today. Hello, Katelyn.
Hello.
So good to see you here. So good to see you. Today, the subject is commission crochet, crocheting for top designers. And Katelyn actually turned me on to this subject. So I'm really excited to hear straight from the horse's mouth more about this topic and what she has to offer. So thank you everyone who is joining us here either live or on the replay for watching the Yarn Live Show for your daily dose of fiber. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for notifications on every episode we air. Also, you can get tangled up with us in our fun, upbeat, educational Facebook group that's dedicated to the hanks, skeins, balls, cake that we love the most, and to the people who make the most of them, like our guest Katelyn here today, because yarn is life. So today's episode is sponsored in part by you, and we say that because we're asking you to come on over and check out our Yarn Life swag shop to pick up a token tee, tote, or mug today, because every single purchase that you make there not only gives you great podcasts or products, I should say, that you'll love, it also helps us to create more great episodes just like this one and bring on even more amazing guests like Katelyn here today. You can find our shop link in the show notes section today. Now, today's episode, episode 12, it covers a subject that it's not really very well known in the yarn industry, but it's one that can absolutely benefit so many of us in this industry. And we're talking about commissioned crochet work, but with a twist. Now, commission crochet comes in so many forms, but today we're going to talk to Katelyn, who specializes in knitting and crocheting finished items for artists who may write patterns, but might be short on time to actually work up all the samples. So they contract crocheters like Katelyn to work samples for them. Now, I thought this was such a revolutionary idea. I'd never heard of it before. And we were so intrigued that we had to bring Katelyn on so that we could hear straight from Katelyn more about this fascinating topic. So again, Katelyn, thank you so very much for joining us today. It is really lovely to finally have you on the Yarn Life Show. And we were hoping you could tell us a little bit more about what contract crochet means to you specifically.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I definitely enjoy the Yarn Life and watching all the episodes. So this is like really cool fangirly moment here for me to be able to be on.
Me too. I love it.
So contracting crochet, from my perspective and what I've been doing is working with designers to make a sample that either gets sent off to a magazine, a yarn company, or potentially even for them to use like in their Ravelry store to sell a pattern. And so they have designed the pattern, they have it all, most of the time, written out, and then I kind of go off of that pattern and make the sample for them. So they really haven't done any work in the pattern, so it is a back and forth conversation about what's going on with whatever the piece may be.
That is so fascinating. Now, I literally had never even considered this until you told me this. And so that's why in my mind, it was just kind of like this aha moment that literally blew my mind. How did you get into this? Was this a concept that you kind of stumbled on, or did you see other, did you kind of invent this? Or did you stumble on other people who were doing this in a realm of those sorts?
I definitely did not invent it. I stumbled upon it. So I was working full time and I had my first child, and we made a family decision that I was going to stay home. And I needed a little something to do, and I love to knit and crochet. And so I was trying to figure out how to make some money from it, basically so I could keep up my hobby without, having that second income and trying to make a budget work. And it just so happened that the timing was almost perfect that Marley Bird had posted that she was looking for some test knitters. And she was getting ready to do a crochet along, but wanted some people to work through the pattern so she could have photos and some other things first. So I signed up for that and got accepted to make her blanket, her sampler blanket. And then after that, she asked a few of us to be a contractor and said, basically, I'll give you patterns to make, you make them, and then I'll pay you for it. And honestly, I'd never heard of it before. I never heard of being a test knitter or crocheter before that point. And so it really opened the doors for me. And it really put me out there to start seeking out different designers that had that need and wanted somebody who would be able to do that with them. I will say the caveat to it is that it can be very hard to find designers who want a contractor. And it comes down to how much they're getting paid for an item. Do they have the money in their budget to do it? And it also depends on how the designer designs. For example, with Marley, she can design a pattern without ever making it. She'll either chart it out or write it and then hand it off and say, hey, can you make this? There's a lot of designers, though, that can't do that. They need to be working the pattern to see how it's pulling together. And so that's why it can be limiting in what designers can offer to hire somebody to do that.
So interesting. And, speaking as a person who does write patterns, I can absolutely see that side. And I have so much already. I love and respect Marley so much, but hearing that that's part of her process, my respect level just went up like tenfold. She is like a goddess. I can't even imagine being at that level. I can't imagine, my brain working in that capacity, kind of writing something out and then just saying, here you go, Katelyn, can you make this for me? So that's just, I really am. I'm just like awe-inspired to hear that. I think you brought up a lot of really interesting points that, we don't hear these things. I look at me, I'm like flabbergasted. You've stunned me. I think it's so interesting on so many levels because I reached out to you personally. I think it was about 2 months ago because I was going to be remaking something in a different yarn. Right. And I literally did not have time, but it would have been something that would have financially been of benefit to me. And so when I had first heard about that from you, it was just, it felt like the stars aligned that, oh my gosh, Katelyn could be somewhat, then I could pursue this to where maybe I wouldn't have before. And so I think on levels like that too, it's so I really want people who write patterns like me to know that there are people like you out there, and it gives so many more opportunities for people who not only write patterns, but people who are looking for work in the yarn industry. This is just one of those outlets.
Right. And to note on that for designers, I said that you get paid monetarily, but that's not always the case. I have worked with some designers where they provide the yarn, I make the sample, I send it to them. So they're paying for the shipping, they're paying for the yarn, they get the photography that they want, and then they send me back the finished item. So I'm still getting something out of the transaction. And, I'll be honest, I only kind of do that when it's nicer yarn that I might not be buying for myself. So then it works out for me. Then I'm getting something I like with a really nice yarn. The designer's getting something they need done. And it's not always a big monetary value coming out of their pocket.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that too, for a few reasons, because in this industry at any level, I mean, this is still a hobby that we love. You don't get into crochet because it's like, well, it pays well, We're here because we love it. We love the yarn. We love the people. We love to make new things. So it's so interesting that you say that, because I, as somebody who writes patterns, I have no idea if anybody's ever going to buy this pattern. And so, sometimes it's hard to know how much to invest in just one single design. Can I make every single size? Can I hire someone to make some of the sizes just to make sure that they work out okay? Can I hire a photographer? Can I hire a tech editor? There's so many different things that go into it. So it is nice to hear that, there can be different kinds of compensation. And it sounds like, every item is different. Every person is different. Every pattern writer is different. And just finding a good mixture, like it sounds you've found with Marley, can be really beneficial. Just finding people that you really appreciate and you can work well in those capacities.
Exactly.
Wow. So this, we were talking offline right before we went live, and you said something that I wanted to mention here too. And that was, I don't remember the phrasing that I used, but it was something like, we have to juggle a lot of different things. It's really hard to, or let me back up just for a minute. In this industry, some people think I have to do everything. you know, I have to dabble in all aspects if I want to maybe make a career out of this or make a paycheck out of this. Or some people just put all their eggs in one basket and they just do one thing. And so what was your advice on that, or what is your stance?
So from my perspective, especially with being like a contract knitter or crocheter, it is not a full-time job. I don't want to say it's something that pays for your hobby, but it kind of is, because going back to just Marley as an example, because I've worked the most with her, you know, it depends on what's going on. When she has a crochet along coming up, you know, she usually needs a couple different samples of it so she can show it in different color options and people can get a better understanding of what it has the possibility of looking like. But, you know, her crochet alongs are only twice a year. So that leaves big gaps. And yes, she has other projects going on in between there, but it's not like a guaranteed every week, every month, you know, you're going to have a project. So it's great to build relationships with a designer because A, you get to know their style, and then it allows you to have that kind of relationship where Marley can send me literally a chart and say, here, do this. And I can understand where she wants to go and give feedback to her saying, is this really what you wanted? You don't typically do things this way. It seems very strange, because you become the eyes and ears, so to speak, of the designer as you're working through the project. You're making sure that it's going to work for other people. You can't make assumptions while you're working it and say, oh, I bet they meant this. No, you have to be like, is this really what you wanted, so that it becomes that project that they need.
That's so interesting. So you're not just making a sample, you're essentially working as a hand tester and a tech editor and a proofer as well. So you're working in all of those capacities.
That's right.
Oh my goodness.
And that just speaks to kind of the industry, that I feel like you do have to kind of have your hands in a couple different places if you want to stay, you know, fully employed, if that's what you want to call it, to have that traditional like 9-to-5 type of thing going on. So a lot of times, you know, you'll have a designer who's also a tech editor. You could have a designer who also sample crochets for people because they have some extra time, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying you need to do 500 things, but one thing is probably not enough to make a full career out of it. Just like a designer doesn't usually just design for their Ravelry store, they're also looking at books, they're also looking at magazines, they're looking at different publications and ways to get their name out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. There are a lot of roads you can travel, a lot of hats you can wear in this industry. Yeah. And sometimes you may think that one is going to fit best for you or one is going to work best for you. And then sometimes that road just takes you somewhere you would have never thought.
Right.
Wow. Wow. So how do you decide who you're going to work with? Do you still kind of, do you keep your ear to the ground, so to speak, to kind of look for new opportunities? Are you always looking for new opportunities? Let's see how many different ways I can phrase this question.
Well, before we start talking about looking for the opportunities, I do want to just say, either for a designer or somebody wanting to kind of do the contracting work, you have to have a good skill set, because this is not necessarily for the beginner to be getting into. Mm-hmm. Testing patterns is good for a beginner because it gives the designer a different perspective on things. But when it comes to contracted work, you definitely want to have your skills honed in, because you're going to get very short time frames usually to be making things. For a magazine, a lot of times there's only 2 weeks from till you get the yarn. You can make it in 2 weeks, but then you've got to have it sent back and you've got to account for all that shipping time. So it has to be something you really want to do. And as a contractor, you have to treat it as a business because you're impacting the designer's business. And so then back to your question, yes, I'm always looking for new opportunities and just trying to make connections with designers where I can and trying to just explain what I do, because like you had said, a lot of people don't know that that's an option.
No.
You know, and I think it's a great opportunity for designers if they can reach out to people and say, hey, can you make this for me? because it definitely gives them more time to be working on the next pattern, which ultimately makes them more money.
I love that we are very much having this conversation live, as you can see with me kind of stumbling and redirecting all of my questions, but I literally find this so fascinating. And because I've never worked with anyone like you before, I've never utilized this process. Like this is totally new to me. Like right. I want you to like train people. I want you to like teach people. And I'm so glad you mentioned too that, okay, wait a minute, if this is really a path, if people viewing are looking at this being a path maybe that they go down, let's talk about skill sets. Let's talk about what it takes. And you mentioned things that I thought were really powerful. You know, what is your skill set? Maybe you do start just as kind of testing things to see if you can get a feel for how people write, what are some universal standards so that you at least know what the baseline is. And then kind of see how people write creatively that may differ from that. And then maybe you dabble a little bit into some tech editing. And then from there, maybe this could be a great opportunity, because you're absolutely right. The next layer to that is trust issues that some people have. You know, I may only have so much time or resources to put towards something. You know, for example, you know, we were talking about if I publish a pattern, I might only expect to make this amount of money. And so how much time and energy can I invest into that? So if I buy yarn for Katelyn to make this thing and I only have 2 months to get it, you know, made and shipped off to my photographer, and I've already booked my photographer. And if Katelyn goes, well, I really wanted to make it and I got the yarn, but it's not working out like I wanted it to, or, you know, my kid got sick, or, you know, life happened or anything like that, I feel terrible. But then again, like, okay, wait a minute, I just put all my eggs into one basket. Like, then what do you do? So yes, I can definitely see where you would, if you were looking at being helpful in this capacity, that you do have to have a certain skill set. And then I guess you do have to work to build trust. You do have to have some kind of, I guess, resume where people can vouch for you. Yes, Katelyn's always on time. She always does what she says she's going to do.
Right. And it's not just the skill sets of what can you do in knitting and crocheting. It's your skill sets, you know, personally. Like, you have to be a good communicator. You have to be able to throw up the red flag the instant you see a problem. You don't work through it 20 times and go, okay, now I can't figure it out. I only have 3 days to finish. It's, I can't get through it once. I'll try it a second time. It's still not making sense. Hey, what does this mean? Because, you know, it's your time, but it's really the designer's time. They're the ones on the biggest time crunch to be able to get things in and out so they can keep making their revenue, therefore supporting you in having your contractor work.
Right, right, absolutely.
And once and done, that you don't mail things back on time, you don't have good quality work. I mean, that includes blocking, that includes, you know, making sure your ends are woven in really nicely. When you send it back, it should be the finished product ready to go to photography, because sometimes it doesn't go to the designer. It goes to the magazine or the publisher because they're going to take photographs of it. So there is no time to fix it and make it presentable. It's got to go in that form.
I have to say that terrifies me a little bit because it goes back to those trust issues. You know, if you're putting your name on something, I would have to trust you so much if my name's going on something and you're making something on my behalf and sending it somewhere where it's going to be photographed. And like, you know, I mean, I have to say, you know, confession here, I get kind of sloppy about some things. Like, I really hate to weave in ends. And so sometimes I just leave them dangling. And whenever my photographer is kind of like, how are we going to work around this? I'm like, we'll just make it work. We'll just hide it over here. But, you know, so I wouldn't have that luxury. And I don't, you know, gosh, oh my gosh. I would love to see, I have to say, for so many reasons, I would love to see more people like you in this industry who, you know, have that skill set, have that work ethic, who, you know, would take pride and ownership into something like that. Because I can't imagine how many people who maybe have the creativity to write different patterns, but maybe don't have the ability or the time or the resources to work them all out. And I can see that on so many different levels. Maybe you're not even having it photographed. Maybe you just need to see that you've crocheted a wedding dress and all the sizes work out so that nobody has to kind of figure that out after it's published. So I can really see a need for this on so many levels.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a great need. And, you know, again, the contractor, I don't want to say it's a thankless job, because the designers definitely thank you a lot for helping them out. But it is really cool when you see a design out there and published. Like, I don't know if you can see behind me the shawl.
Oh, I see that.
That was one of the contract pieces that I did for Marley. And I loved it so much, I went out and bought my own yarn to make my own version, because it's actually a free pattern on Red Heart. And so every time I go on Red Heart and I see that pattern, it gives me a smile. I mean, nobody else knows that it was me. It has Marley's name on it.
That sample.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So nobody knows that, but it still makes me feel good. And I share it with all my family. Hey, look, I did this.
Absolutely. So I guess that goes back to that question that I was trying to allude to earlier when I said, you know, do you always have your ear on the ground for maybe new opportunities? And if so, how do you present your resume, so to speak? You know, what does that process look like?
Sure. I think, at least from my perspective, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's building the relationship with designers and, you know, starting to test for them. Let them see what your photos look like. Even if you're not taking the photography, you still want the photos of what you're making to look presentable, that they can see the quality of your work. If it's a blurry, at night, laid out on your carpet kind of photo, that doesn't make people want to say, oh, wow, that's great work. They're looking at, oh, I can barely see the stitch definition. I can't see this. I can't see that. So it makes it harder for them to make an educated decision on if taking the risk with you is worth it. And it really does come down to, you know, having that word of mouth. Like, once you work for one designer, they can recommend you, if they're willing to share you, I guess, with other designers.
No. Well, I probably would, honestly. But no, you're absolutely right. I guess that's part of it, is that you have to be able to network in this industry so that people would be willing to share you. Yeah. Especially if you have those kind of talents.
Right. And I know on Ravelry, there's a couple places, if you go to like designers forums and stuff like that, sometimes they'll post, hey, I need a tester, or hey, I need somebody to make this for me. And then it can kind of build off of there. I'll be very honest. It's not, at least in my opinion, it's not super easy to find the work until you start making the connections with the designers. You know, there's just so many people out there that do this as a hobby, and some that are really amazing in what they do, and some that are just doing it for fun, and that's perfectly fine. But, you know, it makes it hard, because designers don't always seek you out. They let you come to them, and then make their decision from there.
Interesting. So interesting. I think you've already given so much great advice, but I was wondering if we could summarize, you know, what advice, what specific action steps and advice would you give to people who are hearing what you say and it interests them and maybe they want to dabble in this?
Sure. Well, I'll take it from the designer perspective first. So in my opinion, being a contractor, I'm obviously not a designer, but you really want to look for somebody that you have a connection with. You want somebody that you can communicate clearly and easily with, because that's going to be your biggest strength between the two of you, to get things done on time and the way you want it. From trying to be a contractor, you really need to do some like soul searching type of thing and make sure that you're willing to commit, because it's your name, but it's really the designer's name. That's who the project is getting associated with. It's going to be looked at as Selena's work, not Katelyn's work. Nobody's going to know I did it other than you and maybe a couple other people, because it doesn't say designed by Selena, you know, sample made by Katelyn. You know, so you really have to be willing to give it the time and say, I'm going to give this my all, as if it were my project, as if it were my name on it. And, you know, you have to just be willing to openly communicate when there is a problem, when something comes up in your family life, your kid gets sick. Hey, I'm trying my best. Is there any wiggle room in what's going on? Or, you know, you've got to be upfront, because if not, the designer can pass it on to somebody else and still save their end of their promises to whomever the pattern is going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I can imagine, I mean, in this industry, you can either be talked up, and I've seen this, you can either be talked up and everybody likes you, but you make one mistake on that level,
Right.
I guarantee you'll be blacklisted.
Yep.
Oh, well, I can imagine, you know, because there's time and resource. And
Right.
so, I mean, I think as long as you're forthcoming, you know, if you keep, Selena, I just can't help it, you know, I have the flu or my, you know, this, and I'll do everything that I can to return the resources so that you can find another substitute or something like that. But
Right.
you contact me the day before it's due and tell me you didn't start, because
Right.
I would cry.
Yes.
I love this. And I'm so glad you've shared all these things. And I wanted to share a little bit of perspective from my side too, because I've never thought that I really kind of dabbled in this contract crochet work, but I guess I do on a very small level. And I thought it was worth mentioning, because I don't think a lot of people do what I do. And I think even I could better what I do. Whenever I make something and it comes in a variety of sizes, I may not be able to work up every single size, but I may work one or two. So what I love doing is I love going to my own group. And so a lot of people who write patterns have their own groups now. That's kind of the trend, is to have a group. And I go straight there and I ask for pattern testers, and I specifically get people to test every single size. And I'm not specifically looking for tech editors. I'm really just looking to see, okay, can you work up the sizes? Do they make sense? Does it flow well? Do all the numbers match up and things like that? And what I love about that process is that it brings forth, you know, just a multitude of people who may or may not, you know, be you know, that you could be a beginner, you could be intermediate, you could be expert, you know, all walks of life working up the same pattern and seeing if it comes out correctly. So what that helps me do is it helps me to, again, see if all those sizes work out effectively. But then I love to bring that an extra step. I really love Ravelry, because there's so many different options that can help everyone involved, really. So for example, you know, once I post that pattern on Ravelry, once it's ready to go, I ask all my pattern testers to post a project to Ravelry.
Right.
And I do kind of use that in some of the capacity that you're talking about, because, you know, not only am I getting social proof, hey, lots of people made this, here's their finished product. And, you know, it shows variety in colors people use, or different yarns or variations. Maybe they added different embellishments. But then it also kind of shows, you know, a resume and social proof for people who may want to get into this as well. So what I would add, since I gave you that very long process, what I would add too is people who are looking to get into this. That's one way you could build your crochet resume, as Katelyn was saying, you know, start with testing, start with proofing, start with actually making things and working with people. Because when you have a process like that, you know, if I'd never heard of Katelyn and today I was interested in her, I could go to her Ravelry account and I could clearly see what kind of projects has she made. You know, maybe who she's networked with, what patterns is she making, and what do those patterns look like compared to what, you know, what that finished project looks like. How well does it match up?
Yeah, exactly. I think being a tester and kind of going through that process is great for both the designer. It's almost like free marketing, because they're helping to build that pattern before you even sell it to anybody. Then people have a better understanding of what it looks like, what can be done with it, other options. But it does also help the tester then to kind of build a Ravelry page, which you're right, is the resume for knitters and crocheters. And testing is definitely an option. No, you don't get paid for doing your work, but you get a free pattern out of it to make that particular item. I guess I should say everybody I've worked with, you've gotten the pattern for free in return for a photo of the finished item and any kind of notes or issues that you had going through the pattern.
Absolutely. And it's definitely not work for everyone. It's what I find interesting about it is that there's a lot, and I'm so thankful there are a lot of people who like to see if there's an issue. They like to be part of that process. And it's exciting for everyone involved. If you like to proof things, if you like to test things at the ground level, maybe offer input like, well, I know you're saying to single crochet here, but you know, I dabbled with half double and I just think that looks better. I just wanted to throw that your way.
Right.
So it's fun, I think, for all sides, you know, if you especially want to give some feedback or perspective on the design process as well.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. This has been so exciting. I really genuinely love this so much because I honestly never had a conversation about this on this level ever.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But you know, you've got to have your heart in it, and you have to know that it's not easy to find the work, and it's not going to be a full-time job.
Yeah.
There are opportunities out there, and I think that more designers should know about it because I think it gives them a lot of opportunity to grow their business because they can produce more by not having to be the only person touching a project from start to finish.
And I would say on the opposite side too, you know, as somebody who writes patterns, I would love to see more people like you in this industry. And I'd love to find more people like you in this industry because it really, producing a pattern really can be more of this community event. It can be this community feel. You know, I would so love to get feedback and hand testers and maybe help with samples and things like that. I think that it helps to bring light and maybe produce the best kind of work possible.
Right. And it's definitely one of those things from a designer perspective of, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but you'd write something for school, a paper, whatever, you think, oh, I read this 50 times, it's perfect. Somebody reads it, and the first sentence, they're like, you have this word spelled wrong, or you have an extra word in here, and you're like, really? I just read it. You know, it's the same thing for a designer. You can go through the pattern and you already know what you want. And so it's easy to skip over things in your directions, where if somebody else is working on it, you have that second pair of eyes who kind of is coming at it with no preconception of what it's supposed to be. Because a lot of times when you test or do samples, you don't have that image of the finished product. You just have the directions because you're making that finished product for the designer.
You know, I have to say, you have to have a special kind of, you know, do you also enjoy like putting jigsaw puzzles together? Or what do you enjoy? Like, I'm wondering if there's any kind of correlation between like really enjoying that kind of work and really loving to solve. It's almost like a problem to solve. Like, am I going to get the right answer, even though I haven't seen what it's supposed to be yet?
Right. Yeah, I would definitely say that I'm more analytical.
Yes.
That's definitely where I like to be. Like, I'm a numbers girl. I like proof of things and I like to figure things out. And for me, it's a lot of fun when I work through it because it's trying to get it to that best place, because I know what it's like to be a consumer and get a pattern and you're like, oh my gosh, what are they saying? Or you look at their pictures and their like the sample that they have and you're like, ooh, do I really want to do that? Where if somebody just would have said to the designer, like, hey, try a different color, try a different stitch, try this, you know, to make it easier to read, it would make a whole world of difference for that designer and the consumer who's trying to purchase it.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many times, like people that are just testing my pattern, oh my gosh, I love them. I could not do this without them. People testing my pattern are like, I know that you're saying to do this, but I really feel like you should do this. Or I know you're adding this in, but I really and I love that. I love that kind of feedback, because just like proofing, you know, an essay or something like that, you may completely miss this little detail that makes all the difference.
Right.
Yeah, I've done that lots of times. Lots of times. Well, Katelyn, this has probably been the most exciting episode. I have so many comments. There are so many people, both on, you know, I'm streaming live on Selena Baca Crochet page, and so many people have comments here, and there are so many people as well just on the live chat here on our YouTube channel. So I just wanted to read a few of those. Sure. We've got Sheila here. She says, good morning. We've got Chrissy Jeffries, first time catching us live. She says, I love working for designers to help take the time off their plate so they can continue to work on other things. Oh, and I speaking from experience with Chrissy, I love you for it. Let's see. Megan is here too. She says, this is definitely something I would be interested in doing. Dawn's here as well. She says hello from Iowa. And let's see, Megan says there should be a section on Ravelry that has contract work. And you were just kind of mentioning that. You were mentioning that there's forums set up there, or maybe certain people who sell patterns, who write patterns, they could have their own forums on Ravelry, and maybe that's where they find contract work. Or like I said, even on Facebook, like I love Facebook, I love social media, and my own group for my page is where I find people. So that's a good place to start too.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, just a lot of people just saying hey and hello, and so excited to see you here. Brittany, first time making it here live. And let me just give some shout outs to people who are watching or listening from my page. You're getting so much love, Katelyn, so much love. Rebecca says hi. Alina, Amanda, McKay, Stacy, Sheila, Alicia, Ann. Let's see if there's any questions here. Let me find maybe one question here. Let's see. Lots of people who are interested in what you're saying. Lots of people would love to do that. Let me see. Let me find a question. Okay, Trista just says, I've tested patterns for a designer for almost a year now, and I've brought up to her almost the same thing about her designs, just finding little bits of feedback and things like that.
Right.
All right, so let me see. All right, I don't see any questions. I think that you've just been very thorough, and maybe that's why we're not seeing questions. But just a lot of, you're getting so much love. Trista also says, this is so informative. This is making me think of how to be a better tester and how I can become a better designer.
Very good.
So this is great feedback for everybody involved. It's definitely not a conversation I saw as one-sided. I think that everyone involved, literally everyone involved, can benefit. You know, whomever's doing the testing, who's ever doing the writing, who's ever doing the publishing, like just everyone involved can really benefit from this.
Exactly.
Oh, I love this so much. All right, lady. Well, do you have anything else to add? Is there anything we missed? Any final tips?
I don't think there's anything else that I could think of. I think I covered it all.
I think you did too. I mean, this is definitely something that I could have more conversations on just because I find it so interesting, but this was definitely a great starting point. And I really appreciate you coming on here and chatting, not only about your experience, but for tips for, you know, just to better the industry as a whole, really.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Okay, guys. Well, I've got some news. As we're wrapping this up. Our last episode of season 1, because this is season 1 of the Yarn Life show, will be next Wednesday at 10 a.m. and that's West Coast time. And that's 1 p.m. East Coast time. So you can join us for some random yarn chat, games, prizes, and more next week, because it will be our final episode of season 1. And we probably won't do season 2 until next year, because Jess and I, you know, we're the founders of Yarn Life, and we've got some other exciting things, and we just want to enjoy the holidays, as does everybody. So you can catch more about that episode in our Facebook group, Yarn Life, and you can find that link in the show notes. Now, also remember, today's episode is sponsored in part by you. So please check out our Yarn Life swag to pick up a token tee, tote, or mug today. Every purchase you make there helps us to create more great content, offer more episodes, and bring on even more amazing guests just like Katelyn here today. So you can find our shop link in the show notes section today. Thank you all for joining here live. Thanks to everybody watching on the replay. And thank you from the bottom of my heart, Katelyn, for coming on over here and chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime, lady. All right, bye, guys. We'll see you next time.